Hey there, everybody. Back again with another April review. We got a double feature for you today. We're going to cover Fantastic Four number 13, and when we wrap up with that, we're going to hit you with a little bit of Black Sad. Okay, but first things first. Let's get into it. Fantastic Four number 13. See if it shows. There we are. Shows the cover here. It's the first appearance of the Red Ghost in his Super Apes. This was put on the shelves in April of 1963. The premiere issue of Fantastic Four came out in November 1961. So, a year and some change later, we're getting around to some Super Apes. And so this one starts off classic Fantastic Four opening. Jack Kirby was always sure to open it up with a little bit of action, just so you could showcase, more or less showcase what everybody was about. Not everyone has something to do in this introduction, but some of the principal players show off their abilities. Reed gets to show off that he can stretch. Johnny gets to show off that he can catch on fire. You already know what the thing is about. The only one who really doesn't get an opportunity to shine in this intro is Sue Storm. That's unfortunate. It happens quite a bit. Other stories would be more particular to showcase her abilities about turning invisible, and then later, when she gained the ability to project force fields, that got showed off quite a bit. The force fields really did a lot for Sue's character in terms of just giving her something to do and helping to explain to the reader exactly what her powers were and all that sort of thing. Anyways, so running on, Reed was caught in a little bit of an explosion in his lab because he's testing this new rocket fuel that is made from some sort of element that comes from meteor crashes. And he mentions that meteor that crashed down in Russia that destroyed just hundreds and hundreds of acres of forest, back in the day, that's a real event. That actually happened. It was in, I want to say the early 1920s. It may have been like 1921, but it may have been even earlier than that. I can't remember exactly, but it was, real early in the 20th century. Anyway, so Reed's been working on this rocket fuel because they're in a competition against the Russians to get to the moon first. 1963 would still be 6 years before man walked on the moon. But everybody knew that's what the goal was. That's where everybody was headed. Anyways, then we switch over, and it's the Red Ghost. He's not yet the Red Ghost, but he's working on it. And he has these apes he's trained just in different capacities. This ape's trained to operate rocket ships and submarines and any kind of automobile and stuff like that. This ape, he's trained in the use of weapons and Tommy guns and everything. And then this one down here, he's trained to operate and repair any type of manufacturing machinery. This does not come up anywhere in the book. For the whole rest of the book, that is not even relevant. But it is showing the Red Ghost is showing how well he has trained these apes, the kind of control he leverages over them. His control over the apes is particularly because he withholds food from them. He's starving them to keep them in line, to keep them in check. And so they know that so long as they obey, then they'll get food. And that's the main point of what's being shown here, even though these particular skills don't really come up. I mean, at some point, this gorilla does operate a spaceship, but it's only for a minute. This is a good moment here. I like this, where everyone's arguing against Reed. Reed wants to go to the moon alone because the rocket fuel is still a little bit unstable. It's not completely safe, but everyone's arguing him down, saying that, no, everybody's going to go together. And so there's this good bit of business here between Reed and Ben, where Ben's stuffing him into this test tube. And this is great stuff. The Fantastic Four having superpowers is oftentimes, pardon me, the Fantastic Four having superpowers is oftentimes just ancillary to whatever is actually going on. The team would function the exact same way if they didn't have these abilities, but doing stuff like this is just a great showcase and of keeping that weird aspect of the superpowers in the focus, because you wouldn't do this with just a normal guy, but you can, but because Reed can stretch and form all these ways and all those different superpowers, they're using their superpowers to interact in ways outside of just fighting bad guys. right? And that's an extra element that makes Fantastic Four unique. But anyways, both teams, they take off and they're headed for the moon. They get off in space, and the Fantastic Four, they sight the rocket ship of the Red Ghost. He's out there. And they get a little bit of a scuffle. Now, Johnny Storm is able to fly in space because he has a special harness that emits a oxygen and an Earth-like atmosphere directly around his body, so that he's able to operate briefly in the vacuum of space. Just roll with it. Anyways, they have the kerfuffle there. Everybody's getting ready to land on the moon, and they've gone to the mysterious blue region of the moon, which would come up in Marvel Comics again and again, and become extremely important, especially for groups like the Fantastic Four, the Inhumans, sometimes for the X-Men, but usually not really. Anyways, there's this ancient city in here, and this is the beginning of complications here. This book is going to get far out just real quick. Anyways, they discover this ancient city, and everybody's going off to investigate, but Ben, because he can't grow super long legs or fly or anything like that, he just kind of has a slowpoke, but he ends up getting ambushed by the super apes. And let's see, is it explained here? Yeah. So the super apes, the gorilla gets super strength, the baboon gets the ability to shapeshift. He makes himself look like a Tommy gun, in this panel. And then this one, the orangutan, it's described as magnetism powers. It's more like a limited telekinesis. That's within the world of Marvel Comics, that's kind of saying the same thing. But it's not exactly, it's not magnetic powers like Magneto has. It's magnetic powers in that he seems to be able to make any two objects attract or repel from each other, even if those objects are not inherently magnetic or have the capability to interact the way we typically think of magnets interacting. Right, so like it doesn't matter if it's a piece of steel attracted to a piece of copper or whatever. It's like you're gonna see it later on. There's a spot where he holds Sue Storm on his back through this magnetic power. But anyways, Ben Grimm's over. He's getting ambushed, and then in steps the Watcher. And I forgot to mention the Red Ghost. He's the Red Ghost because he can turn invisible and walk through walls. Right, that's his bit. Anyways, in steps the Watcher, and this Fantastic Four number 13, first appearance of the Watcher ever. And it's just a big issue here because the Watcher would become very important, especially later on with the Galactus trilogy. That would, I want to say that was Fantastic Four number 63 through 66, but don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. Anyways, the Watcher, he captures the super apes, or at least he separates all the interested parties. He gives a little lowdown on what the Watchers are about and their business, just kind of hanging back and watching as things develop without interfering. But now that everybody's in his backyard, he's going to interfere. And the Watcher says that because the United States and the Russians are both interested in establishing colonies on the moon, which is the Watcher's domain at this point, he's just going to let the Red Ghost and Ben Grimm fight it out, or their two teams fight it out, and whoever wins gets supremacy over the moon in the eyes of the Watcher. That's not going to hold through, but that's where they're at. Anyways, everybody separated, so Fantastic Four is going to keep investigating this ancient city that's been abandoned. They get ambushed. Somewhere the Red Ghost got a freeze ray. It's probably some of the technology left over, but it's not explicitly stated. It's intuited through the technology that was left over that he uses later, but it's not said for this one. Anyways, he freezes up Reed, trying to hit Johnny, and Sue Storm gets kidnapped. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The orangutan's using his magnetism powers to hold Sue to his back. Anyways, they thaw out Reed, and they use a bit of equipment to make a makeshift rocket using Johnny as the fuel and the mechanism by which it steers to go off and rescue Sue. But she's able to more or less effect her own escape by freeing these apes and giving them access to food. And this is the first step in the apes rebelling against the Red Ghost, is them finally getting a little food and getting satiated. Anyways, there's a fight between Johnny and the Red Ghost, and the Red Ghost gets away and he enters into the actual home of the Watcher, thinking that maybe there's something in here he can steal and use to win the day. But the Watcher's not having any of it. And he puts the Red Ghost to this almost Lovecraftian bit of torture. He puts him into limbo. He sends him millions of years into the past. He sends him millions of years into the future when the world's about to end. And then he just says, but you're not worth any of that. So I'm just going to cast you out like you're a flea. And he ejects the Red Ghost from the domain. At which point, Reed steps onto the scene with the super weapon he's made up behind the scenes. And the Red Ghost, the super apes rebel against the Red Ghost and chase him across the surface of the moon. And there we have the end. Man, it's just so much happening. Okay, so first things first, why apes? Why is it a team made up of apes? Why not just a team of Russian cosmonauts? Regular human beings, so that you could match the Fantastic Four pound for pound. And I think it was apes. One, just because it's an interesting idea visually to have it as apes. And so that's one reason why Jack Kirby or Stan Lee might choose that. And the second, I think, is to simplify. You don't have to give them any dialogue. You don't have to give them really any sort of character. And then later, when there's the heel turn, and they turn against the Red Ghost, if you're going to incorporate that part of the story, it's easier to explain if it's just apes acting on animal instinct, as opposed to having a nuanced reason, or more or less nuanced reason, for three highly trained Russian cosmonauts to turn on their leader, especially in the middle of this dangerous mission. That would have taken more explanation than could have fit into this story. So I think the reason they're using apes here is mostly just for simplicity's sake, as well as just being just a really good image. Because, this book is, honestly, it has too much going on. The whole thing with the Red Ghost and the apes is interesting, but the real heart and soul meat of the story should be in this ancient moon city and in the Watcher. The Fantastic Four get lumped into the superhero set just because they're more like explorers. And really, I think a story like this would have worked better if you'd cut out the Red Ghost entirely. And it was all about investigating the city. It was all about the Watcher. And you can even include some sort of test of Watcher's going to test mankind now that they've been able to reach the moon, or whatever you're going to do. The apes just seem really superfluous on top of that, as if there was some sort of mandate. Okay, the Fantastic Four superheroes, they need a supervillain in this issue. They gotta fight somebody, And it feels, it takes up a lot of real estate, but it feels ancillary to what the creative team really wanted to do. Which sounds weird because, Marvel in the early 1960s, there was not a lot of oversight from the publisher. The creative team pretty much had free reign to do whatever they wanted within the books. But also on top of that, the amount of time this issue was created in was probably minimal. Jack Kirby was an absolute machine. He could probably draw this entire book in 7 or 8 days maximum, especially in the 60s when he was still relatively young and just absolutely pumping it out. But anyways, that's what's going on here. Lots of fun, classic Stan Lee type dialogue. These word balloons are heavy, but I don't mind. Comic books are the combination between words and images to create narrative. So you need words in there. You don't always need words in there. There was the completely silent G.I. Joe comic that came out in the 80s. But words are good. Anyways, we're going to move on there. Talk about some Black Sad. All right, so we have Black Sad, and we're going to be talking about, this is a collection of 3 Black Sad stories. We're only going to be talking about one. I pulled out my bookmarks. I think I've done something foolish there. This is Black Sad, Somewhere Within the Shadows. Yeah. And Black Sad, he's a detective. He's been called in to identify a body. And this is his old girlfriend, who's a big Hollywood starlet, and just general celebrity, and they had a fling, but it ended sourly. But he's still carrying all these feelings for her, all this passion for her, and now she's turned up dead, and he just can't stand for that. So he's gonna jump on the case, and he goes to visit his buddy. Now this is he goes to his friend, a heavyweight boxer named Jake, and I'll just no comment there. And Blacksad had recommended Jake as a bodyguard to his old girlfriend. Blacksad was fulfilling that role of bodyguard, and he leaves. And then I think in that he kind of sends over his friend. One, kind of to keep an eye on her. Second, just general competency. He believes in the abilities of this guy, but he ends up getting fired. And as he explains to Blacksad, some other admirer of this starlet ends up hiring their own security. And you later learn it's a criminal enterprise. And it's just a really great scene. It's good crime fiction, just good detective fiction. If it wasn't talking animals, it would still be a good story, and the panel layout and the artwork would still be superb. There's really nothing. There are no faults in a Blacksad. I've read 2 or 3 of them at this point, and they're just impeccable. You really cannot say enough about how good they are and how well it functions. I mean, just even here in the colors and the composition of the panels. I'm a sucker. I pretend to understand composition. I'm really naive and ignorant in a lot of the nuances of that. But man, they're doing stuff here that it works, and it always works. Whether you have it in a whole page or just individually one panel, and balancing that out between the panel and the page as a whole is often a difficult task, especially when it's really just a scene of 2 people standing at opposite ends of a room and talking to each other. You can kind of cheat it when there's a lot of action, a lot of kind of stuff like this, a lot of fast-paced action and jumps between scenes. You can cheat a little bit, but when it's still and you got to calm down and focus, man, that gets difficult to do. But anyways, why a gorilla? Why a gorilla here? Well, all of Blacksad, the creative team tries to match the characteristics of the character to a certain animal. So, see, early on, let's see, let me flip back a little bit. I can find it. You have Blacksad, who's a black cat, and he's the detective, which sort of fits. But then you have this chief of police, who is not a Saint Bernard, German Shepherd. And, he's always standing straight up, rigid, has his shoulders squared at every opportunity. And you're matching that general sort of energy that people expect of a well-trained German Shepherd, and you're putting it on this hard-nosed police chief who's, it's not strictly by the book, but he's very rigid and meticulous in his methods, And then you go over to the gorilla. The characteristics, stereotypically people place on a gorilla, fairly or unfairly, I suppose you might say. Just general strength, You want a strong character to be this heavyweight boxer, to be this bodyguard. So you pick a strong animal. This character tells a lot of jokes at Blacksad's expense, and you get the feeling that he just tells jokes at everybody's expense because he's a little bit of a fool. So you choose an animal that behaves, that swaggers a little bit, this braggadocious, and that doesn't mind hurting the other animal's feelings, so to speak. Can make a bit of a fool of himself in trying to get the upper hand on somebody else. And I think it matches. I think they did an excellent job. Just every character throughout the book, I think, matches the animal to the characteristics that are being portrayed. And like I say, I'm not going to talk about the whole of the story here. I just want to focus on that little bit with the ape. But I mean, the whole thing is worthwhile and checking out. Because here you got, see, this lizard or the snake or something, I guess. That's an assassin for the main villain. Just all kinds of different stuff. You have an iguana club, which is it's pretty much a reptiles only club, Oh man. And then here you have more scenes with a few more apes in here. Not really all too noteworthy, but you got an orangutan in here. There's a baboon and a guy fighting. Yeah, back in here. And then they show up on the adjacent page, having their row. Just great stuff. If you ever get a chance to check out Black Sad, highly recommend it. But that's all I got to say about this. So I'll talk to you later.